What is happening, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be going through a channel first, and that is going to be a reaction video to Israel Adesanya's latest training video that he dropped a few days ago. As someone who has been a trainer for the better part of 8 years, been in the fitness industry for probably the better part of 14, and have put in well over 10,000 session hours working one-on-one with clients, I would see if there is anything that we can learn from the way that Izzy is training and potentially see if there's any correlations to how he strikes and moves and see if that shows up in his training program at all. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. All right, Izzy, let's see what you got. Don't mind me looking at the yoga block. This is where my phone is. We're doing it on a budget. So here we go.
Never trust the skinny chef or the fat ones. And for strength coach, you gotta...
What you trying to say, Izzy? What you trying to say?
My name is Beckley from Base Benefit. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. So what we try to do is to build a complete athlete. It doesn't matter what sport it is.
All right, I'm down with it.
You can operate properly.
Complete athlete. So far, so good.
Operate at the highest level of competition.
We got some single arm press. Man, Izzy moves so smooth. He is definitely one of probably my favorite movers. I feel like this is maybe a little loud. So we got some single arm dumbbell press. And I'm assuming this is just a day that we're seeing here. I don't think this is probably going to be the entirety of his program, so I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm sure he probably has some like strength oriented days. And you always have to be mindful that when we're watching these types of videos, how much they're just a highlight reel of the training, because it's got to be exciting and flashy, and there's got to be med ball tosses and all types of fancy movements. But I would assume that his trainer is probably quite competent. I can't see Izzy picking someone who isn't. And I'm assuming on those strength days, it's probably just your boring, basic strength work that he's going through. And then it's probably coupled with some of this more flavorful movements, which we have yet to see, but I'm guessing that's what we're going to be getting into. So let's take a look. I love it, man. I love seeing the like client-trainer dynamic. It's one of my favorite parts about working with people.
I was trying to figure something out that tells people that we build all the way from the base. You know, it takes a few months to actually build your base and then build on top of the base. When you have a solid base, it's easy for any coach to just build on top of that without being scared that the structure is going to come down, you know? So what we try to do at Base Benefit is to build a complete athlete. That's pretty much what we do. Yeah, it doesn't matter what sport it is. We just have to make sure you can operate properly without being scared of you getting hurt and you being able to operate at the highest level of competition, really.
I love that message, and good on this guy. Sorry I missed your name at the start of this video, but I think base fit is very fitting because your base is going to be ultimately how you go out and perform in the world. You don't want to be building a house on top of stilts. You want to have that rock solid foundation. And your training should be no different in that way. And that's something that I also really try to prioritize with my clients, is those first few months is really us just developing that base, getting a good sense of how to feel different areas of your body and good tension in your body, how to move load with that, and then how to ultimately move dynamically around different rhythms and with different tools. So far, I'm really enjoying this guy's philosophy and what he's bringing into working with Izzy. Got some single leg hops. I wonder where this is in the training program. Like, is this warm up that we're in right now? Are we kind of halfway through the session? I'd be curious to know. We're doing kind of like some bunny hops off of, okay, so he's gonna be stacking the weights up. And I would guess here he's probably getting Izzy to kind of just get a good feel for the floor.
Try to make him stay on his toes.
So, okay, yeah.
And then you see the
So yeah,
first
giving
set
him a good
weights,
sense of like
get
what
a
it
little
feels
bit
like to be
higher. So the main
reactionary with
aim
the
of that
feet.
is when it hits the floor, it needs to stay on the ball of his feet and just to
Yeah.
fire the soleus and fire his tendons. So his tendons need to stay nice and tight, so he just pops off the floor.
Yeah, there's one thing that we can kind of make note of here is you can drive from the floor muscularly or from a more, we'll say like tendinous perspective. And some people, depending on your genetics and your heritage, are just gonna have more ability to get kind of this reflexive kind of snappiness from the floor. I'm assuming with Izzy's genes and looking at his calves, they look much like mine. You typically are more challenged in developing your calf musculature, but that doesn't necessarily mean or negate the fact that you can't produce power from them. So I'm guessing here he's just giving him a good sense of kind of that reflexive nature from the floor, good sense of what it feels like to spring from the toes. If I was to work through this, I would maybe experiment with going barefoot, just because I think you can get a really good feel for what the feet actually feel like when they're interacting with the ground. I see he has shoes on, not the end of the world, but that would just be my personal little flavor that I'd throw in there.
That is one of the things that I've seen to lack a little bit in a lot of fighters. It's just when they hit the floor, they just spend too much time on the floor. So we're just trying to, work on that pop. We're just trying to look for that reactive part of the plyometrics. It's not very high right now because
Yep.
we're still
Very nice.
far out of camp.
Yeah, I'll just say I've never worked with a fighter, especially as they're getting close to camp. I have worked with fighters, but not as they're approaching camp. So I'm not sure as to the specifics as to how that might change. But I would guess that you're probably not doing as much plyometric and explosive work when you're actually in, especially the latter portion of your camp. I think this is probably when you're going to want to be developing a lot of that strength and that reflexive plyometric power that you get from these types of exercises. All right. Okay. So we're working on like a hip drive and a slow eccentric.
So what we're doing here is
I like the eccentric a lot.
keep him strong and a long lever. Just get him.
It's always interesting to see these athletes work through things like a hinge motion. So one note there on the hinges, and this is I wonder how much Izzy was trained on like the hinge pattern itself, or if it's just something that was relatively like intuitive or natural for him to get into. I would think it was probably pretty intuitive, would be my guess. I'm sure there was some coaching, but one thing that is interesting about this is if we pause here, he has quite a bit of a hinging mechanic happen, and I think my guess would be, and I do this with clients, is that his center of mass in his upper body, I think, could come forward a little bit more. And in doing so, he's gonna create more length tension, primarily through his hamstrings and his glutes. And that's gonna give you more of kind of that length tension snap to whip you back up into extension. So he's using a lot of glute drive. You can see that when he is coming up, he really snaps and engages through his glutes. But what I'd like to see personally, I mean, Izzy is obviously levels and levels beyond me, but just kind of from what I see from a mechanic standpoint, it's more of a loading of the hamstrings relative to the glutes. So instead of just the glutes kind of forcing contraction, can there be kind of a smooth segmentation between how the hamstrings and glutes contract relative to one another? That's me being nitpicky. Nothing absolutely wrong with what he's doing here. And maybe they're just working on something very specific to the glutes and the hips itself. But if I was to be like super specific about what I'm seeing, that would be something that I would be looking for, is a center mass to get a little bit more on top. Use that length tension to then drive yourself up and you get more of a global extension out of it. In my opinion, of course.
And then get him to power back up.
Huh, okay.
So That's the same thing we're doing here as well. It's just a long lever at a time.
Yeah, so you can see that they're really trying to make the hips a priority, and that anterior shift motion and strong hip extension.
It's like driving your hip up and generating the force from your hip and your glutes rather than just their quads. A lot of them tend to just extend their knees first before the hip starts to kick in. And as soon as you do that, the muscle is lengthened, there's less force coming out of it. So you want to stay compact until you get to that, to that top.
I really like what he's saying there, and I agree fully. I think what he's kind of speaking to is that a lot of people tend to be quad dominant, which is certainly true. A lot of people don't have good access to engagement through their glutes, through their hamstrings, and as a result, they just end up doing a ton of knee extension relative to hip extension. So I'd think for movements like a front kick, like jumping high knee, things of that nature, getting that strong connection of hip extension or anteriorly shifting the pelvis forward with a good hip drive is, I think, probably what they're trying to prioritize here. And what it sounds like, trying to delay the knee extension so you do get more of the hip drive. You have to be mindful, and what I tried to conceptually consider in training is, where are the biggest muscles in the body? Wherever those lie, those are typically the muscles that we want to be driving and propelling us through motion a lot more. The glutes are a massive muscle, and they are attached right to a big joint, right on our hips. So the chances of those muscles being of high priority in terms of force output and being a primary driver to movement, I'd say is quite high. So I really like what he was saying here and agree fully.
I've got 4 days with him now, 2 days of actual weights and then the other day of aerobic and then anaerobic. So what we're doing here is the accessory day where we're doing
there you go.
And a lot of the accessories.
So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. I think probably on those like strength oriented days, it's not going to be super flashy stuff. It's probably just your basic run-of-the-mill strength work. And I would personally be interested in actually seeing some of that, because I'm curious as to how these athletes' joint segmentation kind of get loaded when they start to increase more load. Do you see kind of like the conventional like powerlifter and bodybuilder type motion with their shoulders as an example if they're doing a dumbbell press? Or do they tend to be a little bit more seated with their shoulders out wide? Because that's going to benefit them when they're actually striking. So Izzy, if you ever watch this video, which I doubt you will, but if you do, I would be curious in seeing your strength, pure strength related days as well, and seeing kind of you get into that grittiness of moving some weight. That would be interesting.
Just unilateral chest press. Again, like I said, today is just the day of accessories and just unilateral. We've done the whole squats, bench, and all that.
Yeah, there you go.
Strength building on Tuesday. But we have to hit the same muscles twice a week. So I don't want to do the same thing twice a week, just one at a time and just hitting it separately.
Sweet. I like it. I think that's a good philosophy.
So same thing here, unilateral as well, but you see this one is a lot of anti-rotation because naturally your body wants to rotate to pull that kettlebell up, but you have to just try use your core and just transfer the weight just through your core rather than opening up the whole body. Same thing there, we're just going heavier and heavier because it just feels comfortable.
Got you. So we're kind of like a bent over unilateral or single arm row. I do think that in a movement like this, I think it's okay to rotate. I think what you're trying to build potentially more rigidity around is your hips, not necessarily the core. And this may be a point that I disagree with this trainer, which is totally fine. We can have our own opinions. I think if Izzy is getting some level of thoracic rotation, I think that would benefit him while keeping the hips relatively square. There probably will be some rotation there, but think if you have something that is stable and fixed here, and then you have something rotating on top, you start to create this kind of opposing tension off one another. It's as if something is staying fixed here and I'm twisting something on top. Now I'm really starting to get into the deep core muscles alongside things like the obliques as they kind of wind up, instead of having things just super rigid and then me just kind of going through this motion. I think ideally the more that we can get joints segmenting away from one another to give us the snap through, like we'd find, say, in a hooking motion, as where the hips kind of pull and then the arm is just kind of a byproduct of that, you can kind of mimic it in a movement like this. with the hips kind of staying square, allowing your body to get a full rotation. The obliques are starting to connect and really wind up, and then you can go through a relatively strong row off of that. Keeping, like I said, the hips relatively square, that is going to really fatigue the core, and you're not working so much on this anti-rotation element, but allowing the body where it kind of feels intuitively it wants to go around a structure that is stable, which in this case would be his pelvis.
And I'm happy with the form, so if he says he wants more load, I put more load until I'm not happy with the form.
Cool. If he's happy with it, add more load. So we're doing an isometric holds, okay. Where he's going into the eccentric.
With the pull-ups, it's very important. When you're in clinch, you're pulling down. You know, the lats need to be strong.
I wonder if he's trying to hold it, or if he's trying to milk the eccentric with load. I think he is, it's hard to say. I obviously haven't worked with Izzy one-on-one, so sometimes when you get people into an isometric, they will kind of just like slowly start to let go, and it looks like they're doing the eccentric of the movement, but really they're just breaking from tension, because it really sucks to kind of just hang out there in that level of tension. I would assume Izzy, I mean, he's got the mindset of a fighter, so I can't see him running away from that tension. So I'm guessing either he was fatiguing so much that he was just starting to go down, but he was hanging on to the tension as best as he could, in which case he's practicing just the eccentric of that. And I think what's really good about, say, this position is this is like your fighter stance. And if you can get strong here and build lat tension, now you don't really have to be so reliant on things like your shoulders fatiguing, because you have these bigger muscles underneath kind of supporting the shoulder girdle itself. So I wonder in that if they're doing more of an isometric or just practicing the eccentric and getting maybe a little bit more hypertrophy through the lats. Hard to say, but I think it's a good movement nonetheless, practicing the eccentric or just the isometric hold of getting used to having some muscular endurance there. All right, some med ball tosses with extension.
To generate force, you know, coming from the core. Just a lot of snap from the core there.
Okay.
So we're just trying to keep the body, you know, firing at a high velocity.
All right. I didn't mind that previous movement. Just on the bench, you can really almost isolate the level of thoracic extension. Then you can get the drive from the core like he was mentioning, and the arms are more or less just a whip that's kind of going on top as he's going through the med ball toss. I think a way in which you could build on that would just be doing it standing up, getting full extension, coming right up on the toes. And then personally what I like is leading with the hips. So the hips can come back, and that gives you that snapping motion with the upper body coming forward. And the core is going to kind of integrate as a result of the hip snapping back, rather than you having to squeeze the core. It becomes more reactionary than it does you having to consciously try to flex that to drive motion. I love it. I love the sounds. So good. Oh yeah, you gotta have a little play in there. Izzy's always dancing. All right, so we're doing back extensions, but it doesn't look like he's extending too much to his back. I think they're gonna be probably going more with that hip extension theme. That seems to be what they're working on in this session.
So this is just trying to get the posterior chain to snap up. Same thing. There's, you know, back extensions, which is when your back is actually getting extended. But here, I want him to generate all the force just from the glutes. Again, another thing that I see relaxing a lot of fighters, snapping from the glutes rather than from the quads.
Yeah. You know, Izzy has been through, I guess this is about the end of the video. Izzy has certainly been through it in the UFC, but I do think that his playfulness and kind of that character and that dancing and everything that he kind of brings when he's walking out, I love that, man. I think it's really important to kind of feel loose as you're going into those high tense situations. And I think whether or not he is even conscious of it, he's kind of doing that little play in between something that is quite stressful. And I think that's something that we can kind of all learn from this, is like when we are going through something that's really rigid and we're like moving load, or we're doing some form of hip extension movement, such as what we're seeing here, can I get up and just have a little kind of play and dance following? Because ultimately what training is about is feeling good about yourself and feeling good in your body. And I think Izzy, whether or not he is trying to intentionally do that, he's having fun with it. And having fun in your training, I think, is really valuable. And kind of what he was saying here with the quads and the glutes, that does just seem like the theme that they were kind of going for in this session. Well, a shout out to Izzy for posting his training video. I hope that more fighters and athletes continue to do this, because going through their training content is something that personally I find a lot of value in, and something that I nerd out on a lot. I could probably spend anywhere between like 45 minutes to 90 minutes literally just going through that piece by piece, because I think what you see in those training sessions and just the subtle nuances of how things kind of move can be of high value for people in the training industry or people who are just wanting to move better. Anyways, that is going to wrap this week's video and my reaction to Israel Adesanya's training video. Hopefully you maybe learned a few new things. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can let me know down in the comment section below. I had a good time doing it. If you're into it, I will certainly make more videos like this. If you have any athletes or training videos you'd maybe like me to review, you can also drop those down in the comments. If you're into this type of content about learning how to move better and just get more in touch with your body, you can subscribe for more content. I do both educational, and I'm gonna try to add in a little bit more content similar to this. So until next time, I hope that you are taking care of you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.